Hello everybody, Avian Solar here, and today I'm going to be looking at the police power of arrest. It is worth noting that before I begin, most of my information has come from Blackstone's Handbook for Police and Students 2019, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, as well as Code G. The power of arrest is probably the most well-known police power. However, being as it deprives an individual of their liberty, it is understandably heavily governed by legislation, as well as police codes of practice. There are three types of arrest we're going to look at: arrests with a warrant, arrests without a warrant, and other circumstances where an arrest might be made. Let us first look at arrests with a warrant. A warrant is a formal document issued by a magistrate or a judge. An arrest warrant instructs the police to arrest a subject. Section 17(1)(a) of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act gives the police a power of entry to execute a warrant, and it is worth noting that these warrants are often issued if a suspect fails to pay fines, appear in court, or answer bail. Arrests without a warrant are slightly more complicated. Section 24 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, as well as Code G, allow a constable to arrest any person if that person is suspected of being involved or suspected of attempting to be involved in the commission of a criminal offence, and there are reasonable grounds to suspect that the arrest is necessary. So what do we mean by a person is suspected of being involved or suspected of attempting to be involved in the commission of offence? Well, we can break this down to two parts: reasonable grounds to suspect and involvement in the commission of a criminal offence. Looking at reasonable grounds to suspect, what we mean is, by reasonable, a conclusion that one or more other people would agree on in the same situation as a result of the same personal experience or understanding. This conclusion is practical, level-headed, and a logical result. By grounds, we mean a reason or argument for a thought to exist, and suspect we simply mean we think it's probably true, although not certain. When considering reasonable grounds to suspect, we can also take into consideration a person's motive, means, opportunity, and incentive for them to commit an offence. Additionally, some facts might be known about a suspect. So if someone fits the same profile in terms of description, name, clothes, or has previous convictions, these two could be considered. However, one of these alone would not be enough. For example, if I see someone in the streets and I know they've committed an offence in the past, that is not reasonable grounds to suspect they're going to commit an offence now. By involvement in the commission of a criminal offence, we mean someone is about to commit an offence, is committing an offence, or has committed an offence. An example of is about to commit an offence would be someone in a closed store removing security tags from the close in an attempt to stop the machine going off when they exit. Someone who is committing an offence would be someone shoving clothes into a bag, then walking towards an exit without attempting to pay, or has committed an offence, such as while standing outside, an officer sees a woman run out of the clothes store. The alarms in the clothes store go off. However, they lose the suspect in a crowd. But they find them later, and then they have reasonable grounds to believe they've committed an offence in the past. Now let's look at the necessary to arrest. Code G defines when an arrest is necessary using the mnemonic ID COP plan. The I in ID cop plan stands for investigation. This is to allow an officer to commit a prompt and effective investigation into an offence or the conduct of the individual. D stands for disappearance, and this is to stop a suspect from disappearing. C stands for child or vulnerable person, and this is to protect any child or vulnerable person. O is obstruction, and this is to prevent the unlawful obstruction of a public highway. The first P is physical injury, and this is to prevent a person from injuring themselves or another. P is public decency, and this is to prevent a person committing an offence against public decency. L is loss or damage, and this is to prevent a suspect causing loss or damage to any property. A is address and N is name, and these are to ascertain someone's address or their name. Other circumstances where an arrest might be necessary are if someone fails to answer police bail, is suspected in breaching a bail condition, if they are suffering from a mental disorder and need to be taken to a place of safety, or they are unlawfully at large. Let's look at the process as linked to making an arrest now, and what responsibilities officers have to protect a suspect's rights. When preparing to make an arrest, an officer, where possible, must plan it in advance. Although this is not always possible, if it can be done, it should be done. A risk assessment should be made about planned arrests and dynamically updated if a situation changes. The power of entry must also be considered. As mentioned earlier, if you're arresting someone who's wanted with a warrant out for them, you have a power of entry. In addition to this, Section 17(1) of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act gives officers the power of entry if someone is suspected of committing an indictable offence or certain summary offences. The use of force also must be considered, as force might be required during arrest. However, this force must be reasonable, and the arresting officer must have an honest held belief that the force used was reasonable and appropriate in the circumstances. Once an arrest has been made, certain information must be given. This information is provided in Section 28(1) of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, and states that an officer must inform a suspect that they are under arrest even if it seems obvious, and the reasons why they're under arrest, as well as why it's necessary to arrest them. The suspect must then be cautioned immediately after using the when questioned cautioned as follows. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you fail to mention when questioned something you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. The officer should then note in their pocket notebook the circumstances leading up to the arrest, such as the time, the location, a description of the suspect, the reasons for the arrest and why it was necessary, that the suspect was given the when questioned caution, and anything said in reply to said caution. The suspect should then be taken without delay to a police station unless doing so could cause interference or harm to evidence, people, or damage to property. Alert other people suspected of committing an offence who have not yet been arrested, or hinder in the recovery of any property obtained in the commission of an offence. Let's quickly cover de-arresting, and if a suspect no longer needs to be arrested because the reasons for arresting them or the necessity for them being arrested no longer exist, they should be de-arrested, released, and a note of this made in an officer's pocket notebook. An example of this is if a suspect is arrested to determine their name, and then upon being arrested provide it, they should be released and de-arrested, as it's no longer necessary to arrest them. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice day.